Hello world, and welcome to this edition of Tech on Fire with Blaze. I'm Blaze Stewart, architect at Winelect, and today we're going to be taking a look at Azure Management Groups for managing subscriptions. Hi guys, today we're going to be taking a look at Azure Management Groups and how you can use these to manage your subscriptions on Azure. So as we've been working through our series on Azure migrations, one thing that we have to look at is the planning phase. And this is where we begin to actually shape out what an Azure environment might look like. We've talked about learning Azure, and we spent several weeks talking about assessments, and we talked about doing app assessments, we talked about database assessments, and we talked about doing VM assessments for migration into Azure. We talked about a lot of things related to application migration around architecture and a lot of things like that in the assessment part. Now, what we are going to do with planning is take the information that we have learned from the assessment and some of the guiding principles around architecture and try to plan out what an Azure environment might look like. Now, we don't have to get into the details of every application in the planning phase. This is mostly about getting the Azure landing zone in place. This is the basic outcome, the basic technical outcome for a lot of the planning that we do in subscription management and roles and identity. And this gets into things that are related to security and policy and things like that. So what we're going to be trying to do today is just start the process of looking at what it takes to plan an Azure landing zone, specifically around subscription management. And we're going to be looking at the tool, which is Azure Management Groups, and how you can do that inside of Azure. When we talk about management groups on Azure, there's really no predefined way to set this up. So there's any number of different schemes that you could apply to management groups. This is up to the user to define. So you can have up to 10,000 different objects within the context of management groups. So this starts by choosing which scheme that you want to use. And this graphic attempts to capture some of those schemes. Now, one common way is to organize your subscriptions around the business functions which they serve or the business units that they serve. So for instance, in this first group over here, we have a human resource management group, and inside of that we have a dev test subscription and then apps and another management groups. And of course that apps management group would have subscriptions within it for actually running those applications. And this separation allows you to organize things around the actual business unit and then break that further down into the kinds of workloads that they're going to be doing in that context based on their state in the process of development, dev tests, and then production type workloads. Now, in this second little grouping here, we have an example where we might have an IT group, and then we have production, and then it breaks that down even further by region. Now, a regional group could come up higher in this if that's how your organization functions. If you have regional type setups where you might have an Asia region or a European region, and that is a more autonomous set of groups and teams that function differently than the way they do in other parts of the world, say North America. And you could create a management group that is for that region at a higher level. And that's oftentimes one way that groups will manage these management groups in Azure. This one is very similar to the human resource group right here. It's just marketing, and they have some free trial subscriptions. So this is put in here to show you the kinds of subscriptions that you can manage with management groups. Basically any subscription that shows up in your tenant, be it a trial subscription, an EA subscription, an MSDN subscription, any of those that show up inside of your tenant can be used inside of management groups, and you can manage all of those within this context. So if you create enterprise agreement subscriptions, they're going to show up just like the free trial subscriptions will right here, and maybe a pay-as-you-go subscription over there. It's really bound to the Azure AD tenant, so this would be within that context for managing those groups. And once you have these all set up, then you can then apply policy and permissions by way of RBAC controls into all the subscriptions by simply applying it to the management group, and then everything underneath that will inherit either the policy or the RBAC roles that you apply at the group level. So I'm here in the Azure portal and I want to be able to go to management groups. You can simply just type in management groups up here in the search, or Mana if you want to do that, and then find management groups, and I'll take you to the pane for managing your management groups. So you're going to start off with a root group, and the root group is going to have all of your subscriptions in it at the point of creation. So this is going to show you the whatever subscriptions you have bound to the tenant that you're currently working with. And so my tenant has 5 subscriptions associated with it, and I want to create management groups for these 5 subscriptions. So to create a management group, it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to click on add over here, and I'm going to create a new one. So I'm going to call it Blaze. Let's call it Blaze MG or something like that. And this says Blaze's management group, or Blaze's MG or something like that. I mean, you can rename it, but the ID can't change once you set that. So I'm going to submit that, and it'll create that management group for me. Now, this might take a few seconds to finish, but basically it's just going to create a new group. And what you can do with the group is assign subscriptions to it, or you can continue to work with the way it is, or you can create subgroups within that management group. So once this creates, we'll come back and create a subgroup. Now my Blaze MG, my management group, is created. I can do one or two things with this. I can either add in a subgroup, or I can add in subscriptions to it. So if I go into the actual management group itself, I can create a new group right here by adding a new group to this one. So if I called it sub group or something like that for the ID, and for the name, I'm going to call it subgroup with a space, and go ahead and create that. And that will create a group within a group. And then once I get these groups created, I'm going to assign some subscriptions to them. So now that I have the management group set up, I'm going to go over here to subscriptions. I'm going to add in some subscriptions to this particular management group, this Blaze MG. And to do that, just simply click on add over here. I'm going to add in this sponsorship subscription right here and save that. And that's going to simply add in that subscription to this parent group here. Now, if I wanted to go add them to the subgroup, I can simply go into this one and add a subscription here. So let's go ahead and add in these 2 Visual Studio subscriptions to this management group here. And that's fairly straightforward. So let's add in that second one. And that will then add 2 subscriptions to the subgroup, and then I'll have 1 subscription in the parent group. And that allows me to have a hierarchy now that I have set up. So let me refresh this, and it should show up now. So this is my management group hierarchy, and I have subscription up here in the parent group, and then I have 2 in this subgroup. So that's pretty straightforward on setting that up. You would have to kind of figure out how you want to organize this for your particular organization. And it's not set in stone once you do it. You can move a group, and therefore the subscriptions in that group, to another management group. If you so choose, you can move it up into the root group, or you can move it to another one. So you can rearrange things or remove subscriptions from one group into another very easily with this utility as well. So it's not set in stone once you do this. You can kind of change the hierarchy, you can change the configuration as your organization changes, or you might be moving reorganizations or things like that. It's just depending on how things work in your organization. But once you have these set up, it's pretty straightforward to assign permissions as well. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, I want to set permissions inside of my subgroup, because that's the one I really want to set permissions for these 2 Visual Studio Enterprise subscriptions right here. So to do that, I'm going to go into that particular managed group, and I'm going to click on Access Management. Access Control I am right here. And so what I can do here is, in the context of this particular pane, is assign ownership or contributor rights, whatever it might be, to a user, a service principal, a managed identity, whatever that might be. So I'm going to add in a role here. I'm going to do a role assignment, and I'm going to assign owners permissions to the management group, as well as all the subscriptions in that management group. So basically that's going to ensure that all the subscriptions in that group inherit the permissions from the management group. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to select a user that I've created for the purpose of this demo. I called it MG user right here, and I'm going to set that as the owner of this particular management group. Therefore, the subscriptions in this group will be managed as well by that particular role. So let's wait for this to create, and we will go then check this. Now that I've assigned owner permissions to those 2 subscriptions, I should be able to log in as that user and see those subscriptions and all the resources in those subscriptions. So to do that, I'm going to open up a new incognito window and go to portal.azure.com here. And I'm going to log in as MG user at meblaze.onmicrosoft.com. Microsoft.com. So I have this default domain, and that's the user I created for this demo. And I'm going to log in with the password I set. And now I sure stay signed in, but this is incognito, so it'll delete it as soon as I get done with this. So now that I have this up and running, I should be able to click on subscriptions, and it should show me the 2 that I assigned those resources to. And these are just MSDN subscriptions for dev test type that I use. So now that I have these, I can do whatever I want to in these because I've been assigned as owner to them. If I go to resource groups, I see all the resources, and I'm assigned as an owner to the subscription as well as owner to the resource groups and the resources, so I can change anything in these resource groups. But I set that permission by way of using management groups to do that. So this allows me to assign broad permissions across a lot of different subscriptions with that tool. So it makes managing large sets of resource groups and resources and subscriptions rather easy, and it's generally preferred to assign things at a high level rather than down in the weeds anyway, so that you can take advantage of that inheritance. So again, a very useful tool for organizing your subscriptions on Azure and then managing those subscriptions on Azure and the permissions associated with them and the policies associated with them.
If you like this content, please consider visiting us online at www.wintellect.com, and there you can find about services that Wintellect offers, including training and consulting services. Also, please consider subscribing to this channel by clicking on the subscribe button and clicking the bell icon to get notifications when new content becomes available, and also comment down below. You can also follow me on Twitter at @TheOneMule, and also follow Wintellect on Twitter at WintellectNow or at Wintellect. We are constantly posting things about Azure-related technologies and things related to software development. You can also reach us by email at consulting@wintellect.com. Until next time, thank you.